Joins us as we ramp up to the crown and a coronation this week. Yes. Oh. It's a certain majesty.
Ladies and gentlemen,
yes.
This is Talk to a British Guy.
Yes, he is not just any British guy. He is a magnificent host on YouTube. He has many, many followers, and he's quite skilled as well when it comes to politics and analyzing world events. Please welcome Anthony Davis, everyone.
Oh, man. How am I supposed to follow an introduction like that? You really raised the stakes for me. Talk about making it difficult.
I felt your last appearance was too pedestrian in my introduction, so I wanted to crank it up for you a little bit.
You certainly did that, my friend.
I am so excited.
I feel underdressed.
I think one of the things about this coronation deal is that there's so much in the way of costume and revelry and tradition and ritual. I mean, it's steeped in so much crap, but it's all theater crap. So if you're into a show, which I always like, there is a lot there for you. On the other hand, you could see it all as massively wasteful. I think that can be a pretty credible argument made there. I'm guessing, not knowing Anthony Davis, I'm guessing where you are in this position. I'm guessing you're not much into all of this coronation royalty stuff, but that's just a guess. Where are you on it?
You guess wrong, my friend.
Oh,
you
wow.
guess wrong. I mean, firstly, I love the fact that you call it costume, because of course it's not costume. I mean, this is a pageantry, it's traditional, it's protocol. These outfits have been worn since medieval times, right? This is tradition. This is what makes Britain different to other countries. It's what gives Britain its kind of culture and its flavor. It's the reason tourists flock to it. And, you know, I've met King Charles, I should call him now. I haven't actually been in England since he became the king, so I still think Queen Elizabeth is still alive. But you get a sense in England that this is so much part of the fabric of the country that to take it away, to strip it away, to become a republic would mean that there would be a great loss to society. So yes, it's expensive. You know, this coronation is going to cost around $125 million or thereabouts. It's a huge affair. Takes place in exactly the same way that Queen Elizabeth II had her coronation in 1953. It'll look very similar to that, although that was televised. It was the first major worldwide televised event. Imagine like television in 1953. And there hasn't been a coronation since. I mean, this is massive if you think about it in terms of historical events. Right. And this time it's going to be in 4K. Right? Last time it was kind of grainy and black and white. This is going to be in 4K. This is going to be the most visually stimulating thing that you can watch on television. And I recommend it, and I am a fan of the monarchy for all of those reasons. People in America do not understand, and I make this argument a lot, that the Queen or the King or whoever the monarch is, it's ceremonial. They're not a kind of political leader. They stay out of politics. But it just keeps tradition alive. So, we're not ruled by them, even though it says that in the national anthem.
Yeah, you're right. The role of royalty has morphed. Yeah. And certainly the last... the Queen, the last person, as you suggest, to go through a coronation like this, she really sat there and presided over an England and a Britain that was becoming undone, right? I mean, the British Empire was being dissembled, if you will, under her reign. Isn't that right?
And you can't criticize her for that, because she recognized that the wrongs of her ancestors, stealing territory and being responsible for the slave trade and everything that went with that. Her way of dealing with that was when a country decided that it wanted to separate from the empire, which of course was rebranded the British Commonwealth, just to make it sound a little less impactful. She let them go, and she often attended the ceremony to say goodbye. And, she understood that countries need their sovereignty. But for me, there was something kind of fun. When I was younger, I remember like going to the Bahamas, and they had pictures up of the Queen. And they go, oh, the Queen came here. And they weren't talking about another Queen. They were talking about my Queen. And I thought, wow, here I've traveled like 3,000 miles, and they're still talking about that same person. So, I felt quite sad when she passed away, so young. She had a whole life ahead of her. At what was she? 93,
Yeah,
95.
Yeah.
She did pretty well.
Yeah, she and the royals tend to live a long time. They have access to good health care.
Well, they eat well, they don't do junk food. This is the truth about processed food, bacon and sausages. It's like, stay away from that stuff if you want to live to a ripe old age like a king or a queen. Of course, I mean, it's generational. Years ago, the original kings and queens, some of them didn't make it past 25 or 35. But
Sure.
certainly this new generation, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, her husband, who died just a couple of years before her, he was pushing 100. I mean, these people are amazing. It's a bit like Dianne Feinstein. I mean, why don't these people die?
Well, Dianne Feinstein, I'd suggest, is far more dangerous in this new kind of position where I think it's indefensible that she hasn't retired, as you.
I agree.
And as our audience knows, I'm quite animated about this subject. But let me ask you about this. And this, you did surprise me with your position on this, and I'm delighted to be surprised. I'm actually really, I love that you love it, because it's.
I love it. Like, I've got books on her, and I watched the funeral in full length. Like on streaming it in 4K on the BBC. So I felt like I was there. Like, I sat really close to the screen, so I had it in my peripheral vision. Like, I really wanted to kind of be there. I wasn't prepared to pay for a flight, but I was certainly prepared to stick with it. But I lived very close to Buckingham Palace. I lived in like a crappy area around the back, old red light district area in London. And so I would walk past the Buckingham Palace every day on my way to my radio studio, my place of work. And I felt like King George V walking up the Mall in the pink pavement. I would sometimes trot, and take coconuts with me to give the impression that I was on a horse. So, I do have a kind of love of it. But, people of my age have had quite a positive experience of the royal family, and we've seen them fall down like regular families. I mean, Prince Andrew, with his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, he has been, he's been stripped of his title, he's been stripped of his military awards. He is not going to take any part in the coronation. Prince Harry has now been kind of extricated effectively, and off of the back of his book Spare. So there's been divorces and all sorts of, mental health issues, and obviously the death of Diana. I mean, that family has been through quite a lot. So I have empathy for the fact that they are still, at the end of the day, a regular family. They're just very rich.
Yeah, Tom is right. Extricated is a ding word. Well done, well done.
Thank
now, I do want to ask you about your feelings then about the new king. I mean, it's interesting because as Americans, and we see this a lot in our chat as we've talked about this in the ramp up to the coronation, as Americans, Charles becomes a more troubling figure for us to embrace because we put him to some purity test that we would never put to anybody else, and that's what we do. Our same thing with our politicians, as you're aware. Whereas he played around on Diana, who was the most beloved royal figure, I would suggest, in the modern era, and that Camilla component has so reminded everyone of that it's hard for him to get that stink off him, despite the fact that he seems like a pretty solid dude.
I don't think that's the sentiment in the UK. I don't think that they seed Camilla as a stink. He always was in love with Camilla. He was never in love with Diana. He was forced to marry Diana because of, at the time in the 1981, whatever it was, that was the done thing. She was a perfect princess. And the fact that he had been having this kind of secret relationship with Camilla was married, and that was the reason why he couldn't marry her, aside from the fact that she wasn't that kind of young. I mean, remember, Diana was was so young. You know, she was like 15 when he first met her, and 17
Crazy.
when they started dating, and like 19 when they got married. I mean, it's ridiculous. Who's going to survive a marriage when you get together that young? And she loved him. You know, she really did fall for him, but it was not reciprocated. And so again, these are the types of things that happen in normal families. And why should we think that that family would escape these kind of domestic problems just because they're royals? So really, you know, everybody in the UK thinks that Camilla is the person that Charles should have married all along, and for that reason, they'll forgive her.
It's interesting that, and I think you've touched on something so important, that the way that you see the British body politic, or you know, the crew in Britain digests all of this in a different way than we do in the States.
Yeah.
You know,
well, because two things can coexist. You see, this is like people who argue that you can't be on the left and support capitalism. It's like these things are, you know, we're too far gone in society, and so everything can coexist. It's a bit like having a balanced diet, isn't it? You know, it's just everything in moderation, and there has to be some moderation with feelings about a human family. And yeah, you can be like, I'm a Republican and I don't believe in royals and they're stealing money. It's like, well, yeah, okay, if you want to think that, but like there's a middle ground. And that is, you know, look at the plus side and look at the minus side. I do think that the royal family in the UK is going to evolve under Charles. And Charles has always thought of himself, even as a prince, as a modernizer. So it's going to be a slimmed down coronation. It's not going to be 8 hours long. It's going to be 3 hours long. You know, the representatives of the world will be there, but the guest list is kind of fine tuned. I think Joe Biden won't be attending because presidents don't, but I think Jill Biden is attending. Because I think she got a coupon for a flight or something, and she didn't. I think it was like it was one of those companion vouchers, and if she didn't use it before the end of May, then it becomes invalid.
Jill uses the royal coupon.
Yeah,
I don't think that this is Greg. The answer is, well, I'll let you answer this, but I don't think she is going to become queen. Anyway, the question for Anthony Davis: how come Camilla will be queen, but Elizabeth's husband Philip was not king? Now, will she be? She's not going to be queen, is she? Or
she's
what
queen
is
consort,
which is important, right?
So you know, again, it's like it's semantics, and you can be very cut and dry about these things. Or you see, this is the thing about the English language, which is different in the American English, and that is that American English is very literal, right? So you refer to eyeglasses. Well,
right.
We just call them glasses, right? But I think Americans are like, oh, well, you know, there's other glasses that you drink out of, so you have to differentiate. And it's like, we trust that you're smart enough to know that you're talking about glasses and glasses. Like horseback riding, we don't say that. We just say horse riding. Where are you going to sit? On its head? So there's a whole kind of collection of phrases and words.
How dare you, sir?
Which we have to kind of understand that, yes, she's queen consort, but she's not queen. She's not the head of state. So she is the consort in the same way that the Duke of Edinburgh remained the Duke of Edinburgh. And that was part of the agreement when he married Queen Elizabeth II. And, you know, with that, we kind of make allowances for something to sound a certain way, but not mean it.
Right. That's very well said. And I like the drill down on the language itself, because I never even thought of that.
So many words like that. I mean, I've had to learn a whole new language moving to the US. And when if I pull up at the drive-thru and I want to order food, I have to do it in an American accent, because forget it. If they can't see my lips moving, they don't know what I want. If I ask for water, forget that. I mean, you know.
There's never been anything like this.
I have to say, though, I always feel as though the Brits who come here have such an easy time of it, because we just worship your every word because it sounds so refined, you know.
Well, I'm not going to challenge that. You know, if you think I'm refined, A, you don't know me, and B, great.
I actually so enjoy you. The Weekend Show is what you do on the Midas Touch Network on YouTube. And you talk about a lot of stuff. And I see you weighing in on very heavy issues that are affecting this country. But there is I always feel a fresh perspective that you get from journalists from overseas, and you're one of those. And so I wonder if you can give me some first impressions or just some general impressions as we only have another minute or so. But Anthony, we're on the brink of this debt limit thing, as you know. There's a whole standoff there. There is, give me a word on that, because, to see the government sort of held hostage by what are extreme positions is always disquieting. It just reminds you of how easily we can be derailed, I guess might be a way to think of it.
Well, in the same way that you thought that the coronation is theater, I think the kind of debt ceiling game is theater, because there's no reason for it, right? There's no it's not necessary. It's not a necessary argument. The government basically agrees the funding, and the government should be the government, and the government should include both houses, no matter which political party is involved, because what you care about, the common ground, is the United States of America. You do not want it to default. So of course you approve it, because that's what it costs. And the US has got more money than pretty much every other country. It can afford it. So the whole thing is a theatrical ploy and a theatrical game that Kevin McCarthy is playing, because, he doesn't have a huge amount of credibility. It took 15 votes to get in the speaker role, and he's now under the tenure of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who really is running that party, it seems. So this is just, and it happens every time that there is this kind of argument over the defaulting on the debt. It's just a very theatrical game, and somebody has to give. But the sadness for me is the fact that it's not putting the country first. And it proves to me that Republicans are not really interested in the country as a whole. They want to split it up. They want to have a national divorce. They want to own the libs, and they will crash the economy in order to do that.
I think that that's very well said. I think this own the libs thing is real. What is the Champagne Wishes pronounced? Pronounced Jaguar, he's saying.
Jaguar.
And he also wants you, and say schedule, please.
Schedule.
There you go. All right. That's very well put. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Anthony,
Thank you.
Yeah, I really, we love your takes. You have a lot of people here who are big fans as well. So I would love it if we could exploit you again for a few minutes in the weeks ahead.
Sure.
Especially as we get into, I'd love to, this country is so lopsided in the way the courts really tend to run things, and now I'd suggest are seizing power in ways that we've never seen them before, at least in the modern era. And this Supreme Court is, untethered, it would seem, both in terms of what they are going to do from an activist judge standpoint, and also from the standpoint, apparently, of any kind of ethical underpinning. As we leave, I wonder if you can give me a quick thought on that.
Well, the fact that you guys have a political court, a Supreme Court or High Court that is political, is bonkers, right? It's bonkers. I can't think of another word. You can't have politics in justice. It's not a thing. It's certainly not a thing where I'm from, and most of Europe as well. You just don't have political judges. A judge, I wouldn't know the politics of any of the high court judges in the UK, or even in the International Criminal Court, or any of these places that are considered high courts.
When you say you wouldn't know, let me just start to interrupt,
Yeah.
but would you say I wouldn't know based on their decisions, or because there are politics in all of these judges everywhere, all over the world? The question is whether those politics enter into their deliberative process and their ruling.
Their talent, that's their skill, their craft.
Right.
In the same way that I, as a journalist, can have a personal opinion about politics and a persuasion, and yet when I'm doing the news, I just give the facts and I don't have a political skew. That is the craft of journalism. In the same way that the craft of judging, if you are a judge, is that you are skilled enough and intelligent enough to leave your politics in the foyer. And unfortunately, that has not happened. The Supreme Court obviously is now stacked conservative, but it's not even conservative, it's extremist, because banning abortion is not normal. When it's been precedent for 50 years, it is not normal. It's an extremist position. And they all lied about precedent when they were interviewed about Roe or about Dobbs. They all lied about that. So it does not surprise me that Clarence Thomas and, any of these guys have been enjoying holidays and taking advantage of these political donors, because, of course, it is a corrupt court. And how can you expect any justice at any level of the justice system, even down to local courts, if the Supreme Court is behaving in this manner and self-regulating and claiming they have their own code of ethics that they just don't apply. So, America is not in a great way, and I'm really trying to stand up for those who talk about it being the greatest country in the world. I want to bring perspective with other countries that are doing their bit for climate change because they know that it's real, whereas here in the US it's been politicized. So there are so many things that we really need to do. I love this country and I choose to live here, but boy, does it need to, take a long, hard look at itself.
When people say it's the greatest country in the world, I always feel as though that's some reflexive comment, like
it's muscle memory.
Right. It's when people say God is great in some, Islamic country or whatever. It's muscle memory, exactly. It's not based on any kind of evaluative process that has led you to that conclusion.
But also, I think part of the reason is because, if you live in the US, you don't really need to travel, right? And since I've lived in the US, I haven't really gone anywhere. I've traveled around the US because it's such a great country and there's so much landscape, there's different climate, there's different cultures, and within 5 or 6 hours, you can really go anywhere. Now, when I lived in the UK, I would travel all around Europe all the time. And you only have to fly for 2 hours and they speak a different language and they have completely different culture and different values. And so you really learn an awful lot about how other nations do it. And I think this is the kind of isolationist problem of growing up in the US. There is a kind of, because of the scale of the US and the size of the territory, there isn't that kind of desire to be inquisitive about other cultures and other nations and how are other people doing it. And that's nobody's fault. It's just the fault of the landmass and the cost of travel and the fact that you make people work for 50 weeks of the year in America. I mean, that doesn't happen anywhere else either. In the UK, you get 5 weeks vacation, not 2 weeks vacation, plus you get 9 additional bank holidays and as many sick days as you want. You can't use up sick days and then they run out. If you're sick, you're sick.
Yeah.
So these are, and you don't pay for healthcare and education is free. It's like, and so I think the part of the problem is that, and this is why on 5 Minute News, I try and bring world news to American listeners and viewers, because the rest of the world does it differently. And it's really important to just to have a look and see how other countries are doing it, because, America is the greatest country in the world, but not for the reasons that people think.
I'd love to follow up on that on your next visit. I really would. As I say, I celebrate your international perspective, and yet, obviously, this country well by now. Yeah. You can find him on the weekend show, the 5 Minute News. And I love by the way, your conversations go way longer than 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit confusing. I call it 5 Minute News because that was the OG podcast. I still do that. It's a daily 5 Minute News podcast. You get it, drops into your podcast app every morning. So when you wake up, you hear me tell you the news, what's happening, 3 of the most important stories in the world. And then on Sundays, I do this thing with Midas Touch called The Weekend Show, hour-long interviews with the smartest people I can find. And, last week, we had Bandy Leon, who was the psychiatrist who diagnosed Trump as having malignant narcissism. And so, she has now talked about this Trump contagion phenomenon. This is the reason why people are so angry and upset and it's so divided. It's not a political issue. It's a mental health phenomenon. The country is suffering from a mental health disorder, because it's not normal to worship an individual like Donald Trump, to worship him in the way that he is. Democrats don't worship Joe Biden. Some of them are waiting for him to pass away. So it's very, very different. And so she talks about this political division as being a mental health disorder that 70 million people are suffering from. And she says it is curable. So these are the types of conversations I have on the weekend show, and I learn something new every week.
Well, I enjoy those longer conversations that you have, and so I focus on those. But yeah, the 5 minute, the 5 Minute News already. You've got Katie here in the chat, and several others saying that they've added it to their list, and so it's terrific that you come visit us, and I hope we can do more. I mean, I so enjoy your takes, and as I say, I've been since I was introduced to you, I've been watching a lot of your stuff, and I think it's just really great. So thank you, Anthony Davis, and we wish you a happy coronation, sir. That's a
I appreciate that. And anytime, Mark, I'm always here for you.
Oh, this is it. We have the coronation music as
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Talk to a British Guy.
Yeah, this was great. It was a great British guy conversation. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Mark. Take care. All the best.
Happy coronation, my friend. Good stuff. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.